So same as for the chemistry exam, I'm going to outline to you the key concepts that are on your unit exam, and then I will go and talk about specific questions that will be there so that you can prepare for them. Okay? So first topic we went over in this unit, cell theory. Right? So you definitely need to know the points of the cell theory. They're really important. Okay, so make sure you understand or can identify the 3 points of the cell theory. The second point is the one that probably comes up the most, and you would probably have an opportunity to work that into a few of your answers in the written response. Okay, that whole idea of cells carrying out the basic functions, in case you've forgotten what the second point was. Okay, so that's going to be important. Knowing the people, there's probably going to be a couple multiple choice questions that ask about Hooke, Leeuwenhoek, Schleiden, and Schwann. There's only 4 people that know. Okay, so make sure you understand what their contributions were, and again, that's going to be multiple choice, okay, for the most part. But as I said, there's probably a way to work in that cells carry out the basic functions of an organism into more than one written response question. Okay, and then we talked, written response, second point, okay, as I said already. Then we talked about size estimation and microscopy. And there's going to be some multiple choice questions about that, okay, about the handling techniques for the microscope, okay, the order in which you do things with the microscope. That was actually one of your analysis questions on the microscopy lab. And something that we've kind of struggled with, size estimation. There's definitely size estimation in multiple choice. Okay, where basically, well, my poor drawing of it here. So I would have a picture, okay, beside a multiple choice question. So, okay, you'll just see like a block, and on that will be an organism. And then I will have a circle that represents the field of view. Okay? On high power, that field of view is 400 micrometers. So I would ask, what is the best size estimation for this object? A, 50 micrometers. B, 100 micrometers. C, 200 micrometers. D, 400 micrometers. Which one would be the best estimate? C, 200 micrometers. It's about half of the field of view. It's definitely too big to be 50 or 100, and since the distance from side to side is 400, it's definitely not that big. Okay, so that's what you'd be asked to do in terms of size estimation. Okay. Modes of nutrition. Definitely going to be some multiple choice questions about that, and you could probably work it into 1 or 2 written response questions as well. Okay. Remember, the 2 modes of nutrition are photoautotrophs and chemoheterotrophs. Okay. Most of the multiple choice questions will be kind of just strictly recall, like what's a chemoheterotroph, what's a photoautotroph. But there's also going to be some questions about how an organism's mode of nutrition affects its cell structure. Okay, and that was something we went over more than once. Okay, photoautotrophs are going to have cell walls and chloroplasts, and chemoheterotrophs are going to blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's the kind of thing you're going to need to be able to explain. Okay, cell structure. You've had 2 quizzes on the parts of the cell. That's the only 2 you're going to get on the parts of the cell. Okay, but there is a diagram of a cell in the written response on this test where you will have to do exactly what you had to do on the quizzes, label, give the function of the indicated structures. There will be 6, not 13.
Oh, I was gonna ask, like, and any cell?
There will be a cell.
Oh.
Yeah. I won't say which. Yeah. But luckily for you, like 90% of the structures are the same. So, you know, it's not like you have to study 2 different cells, right? They have a lot of things in common. So. Okay, so definitely know the parts of the cell and what they do so that you could label a cell diagram, okay, on the test. Then, important stuff that's going to be part of both multiple choice and written response, compartmentalization. Okay, that means there are separate organelles for all of the processes to occur in. That's what eukaryotic means. Prokaryotic cells don't have that. There's definitely a multiple choice question about that. Okay, we're using those terms, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. That's why I put them on here. Okay, make sure you know the difference. Okay, cell transport. What are the big 3 cell transport processes you need to know? Diffusion, osmosis, active transport. Right? There will be written response questions on those. Plural. Okay? So the way I'm going to ask about cell transport is with a situational, apply your knowledge type of question. So maybe I say, well, actually, I'll give you a way that I used to ask this on the unit exam. I used to put a cartoon that had a picture of a snail family, and the caption, or in the picture, was all these snails in a car, and a sign that said, "Welcome to the Great Salt Lake." And the caption was, "Slug vacation disasters." Okay? And so I said, look at the cartoon and tell me what cellular transport process will be responsible for this slug vacation disaster and how that will work. Okay? So which one? Osmosis. Okay, so you got 1 mark for osmosis. Okay? And then you got to have 4 more marks that are involved in the explanation. Okay, so that would be, telling me what osmosis is. It's the movement of water across a membrane to balance salt concentrations. Okay, how that's going to happen. Well, when there's an imbalance of salt on one side, water moves towards the salt. Okay, this will cause the slugs to shrivel up because there's no control over osmosis as it's a passive process. Boom, 5 marks. Okay, so that's the kind of thing I'll ask. It will be a situational question. You'll have to analyze the situation and go, okay, is this diffusion? Is this active transport? Is this osmosis? I better explain that process and how it works here in this situation. Okay. Now, the other part of this is that for diffusion, it's also related to cell size. And we did an activity on cell size and its effect on diffusion. Expect a written response question about that as well. Okay, situational question again. Okay, we know that big cells have a real problem with diffusion, okay, because diffusion is slow, it's not targeted, doesn't work well over long distances. Okay, so cells need to be small, surface area, volume, all that kind of stuff. Definitely a question about that. Okay, so diffusion actually comes up a couple of times. Okay. All right, so diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Those are the big 3. They will be asked about in the written response, and probably a couple in the multiple choice. And remember that with active transport, a big part of your answer, okay, when you're explaining how active transport works, is mentioning that there are proteins, carrier proteins in the membrane that change shape when the energy is applied to them. That's what creates the pumping action that can move the materials against the gradient. Also a good term to use, okay? down the gradient or up the gradient or with the gradient and against the gradient. Okay, osmosis and diffusion go with or down the gradient, and active transport goes up or against the gradient. Okay, multicellularity. There's definitely a question about that. Actually, I told you about that a couple of times already. What's the picture going to be? The layers of the leaf. Okay, you need to go over the layers of the leaf and explain to me how that diagram shows that a plant is a true multicellular organism. The best way to do that, talk about specialization and talk about how each different type of cell in the leaf has a specific job by telling me what it is. Okay? This shows specialization because these cells do this job and these cells do this job, but they all work together. Without one, none of them would survive. That's multicellularity. Okay? Make sure you're putting in a pretty verbose answer for that. Okay? And what are the advantages? Okay, obviously we talked about this, surface area to volume, as cells get really big, again, diffusion doesn't work, so multicellularity allows organisms to get bigger without having the surface area to volume problem. And again, you can see I put leaf underlined there. Okay, and so this kind of goes with that. Examples of specialization in plants, layers of the leaf. Okay, so we kind of talked about that already. Okay, that's just more specifically. Okay, the next thing we talked about is transport in plants. 6-mark written response question on transport in plants. What are the 2 sets of tubes that transport stuff in plants? Xylem, phloem. Okay, should you know those 2 things? Okay, should you know what each one transports? Should you know how? Like what forces are involved? Should you know where they are in the plant? Okay, there you go. Phloem, xylem, okay, what they transport, how they transport it, explanation, 6 marks. Okay, it's a big question. So definitely know phloem and xylem, okay? Also be able to apply your knowledge because I'm going to have a situational question. Another apply your knowledge situational question about plant transport. Okay, what's the main force for moving water in a plant? Osmosis. Okay, so think about this for the application question. Think about anything that could affect how osmosis works in a plant. Okay, because I'm going to give you a situation. I'm going to say a plant is living in these conditions. How will that affect its ability to transport either water or sugar? Okay, so you need to think, okay, well, how does a plant transport water? Or how does a plant transport sugar? Okay, what can happen here? What is the effect of that going to be? While you're doing that, basically you explain to me how plant transport works and why this situation is going to cause this to happen. Okay, now, each time I go through one of these questions, I'm saying, look, this is what you need to talk about. Okay, I'm basically telling you, here's where the marks are. Okay, you might want to write this part down, but the place where people lose marks on this unit exam every year, level of detail. So let me give you an example of that goes back to the slug question I was talking about. Okay, so the slug question with the slugs going to the Great Salt Lake, the vacation disaster, is a 5-mark question. Okay, level of detail is important. What I typically see is people getting 2, 3, or maybe 4 out of 5 on a question like that. Because they read it and they go, osmosis. Snails will shrivel up and die. That's 2 marks out of 5. Because you only mentioned 2 points. Okay, you identified that yes, in fact, it would be osmosis that would be involved here, and you told me what would happen to the slugs. Okay, well, it's a 5-mark question. Level of detail is important. Okay, your other marks are osmosis is the passive movement of water across a membrane to balance salt concentrations. Now you got 5 marks. Okay, level of detail is important. You tell me about osmosis. What do you know about it? Okay, as opposed to osmosis, slugs will die. Okay, level of detail is important, and that's where people go wrong here, because your first unit, chemistry, was like, I showed Mr. Coderre I can balance a chemical equation, I got all the marks. There wasn't any elaboration required. In biology, elaboration is important, okay? Level of detail. Tell me what you know, okay? Say as much as you can about that topic, okay? Now, the pitfall of that is saying so much that you contradict yourself, because that happens sometimes too. Okay, level of detail is important. I want your answers to be thorough and detailed, but watch out for contradicting yourself. So let me give you another example. I show you a picture of a plant, and it's like a tree on a hillside, okay, like the ones we looked at when we were talking about tropisms, and I say, this tree, early on in its life, was knocked over by a rock slide, but has started to grow straight up again. Explain or identify the process involved and explain how it works. Okay, so you start going, okay, well, it's geotropism because the plant knew which way was up, it needed to balance itself, it's a growth response to gravity, auxins make one side grow faster than the other. Okay, and that's how the plant curves. There's a 5-mark detailed answer. You told me how tropisms work. You told me this particular tropism and how it worked, what it was a response to, okay, how it made the plant look that way. Like, you had tons of detail there. Here's the trap people fall into. They've done all of those things right. They got a 5 out of 5 answer. And then their last sentences, and phototropism could have been involved too. Well, which one is it? I'm going to give you a question. It's going to be one answer. Okay? I'll give you a picture and a description. The description will make it clear. Pick one. Okay? Everybody with me there? Because that's what happens is people are like, they give me this great, wonderful, detailed answer, and then they contradict themselves. Like, okay, well, this isn't politics. You can't play both sides of the fence. You have to pick one here. Okay? You got to be right or wrong. All right. So, parts of the plant, phloem, xylem, okay, we talked about that, okay, where, what they transport, how they transport it, what are the forces involved, okay, we already kind of talked about that. Okay. Also know, the leaves and the roots and what's the job of each one. There could definitely be some multiple choice questions about, what the roots do or what the leaves do or what the stem does. Okay, plant growth, development, and adaptation. So that example I just told you with the tree that got knocked over by the rock slide, that's the kind of question that will test this. Okay, here's a picture of a plant. This is what happened to it. This is what it's doing now. Explain how and why this is going on. Okay. Oh, well, it's geotropism, which is a growth response to gravity. Auxins are secreted to one side, so they grow faster than the other, and the plant eventually curves upwards again. Boom, 5 marks. Okay, so that's hormones, tropisms, okay, adapting to the environment, okay, basically what we just talked about. Okay, and then the stuff we went over today, factors that affect plant growth. So there'll be some multiple choice about that, but there's also going to be at least one, maybe part of another question in the written response where this will be integrated with the plant hormones. Okay, so, you know, I tell you, a plant's in this situation, which plant hormone would be most responsible for this situation and how does it work? Okay, so it's plants have to adapt to this condition, they would use this plant hormone and this would happen and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so being able to explain how a certain type of factor affecting plant growth could trigger a hormone reaction or production in a plant. Okay. And then we kind of talked about this already, but surface area to volume ratio and diffusion. Okay, why can't cells get big? There is a written response question with 4 marks just asking that. Again, it's a situational question, okay? But you would have to be able to explain, okay, for 4 marks, how diffusion works and why large cells having poor surface area to volume ratios would struggle to transport internally by diffusion. So basically the cell size activity. Which, by the way, you guys did really well on, because I marked and returned those already. Okay, so we've got 26 multiple choice and 9 written response questions. Okay, so in the multiple choice, so the whole test, guys, sorry, is out of 79 marks, okay, which makes it a little bit less than your chem test. They'll obviously be weighted equally in your marks, but this one has less marks on it. Okay, so as I said, things that are in the multiple choice, there's some stuff about microscopy techniques, there's some stuff about plant structure and modes of nutrition. There's some stuff about cell transport. A few things about, you know, parts of the cell. Okay. A few things about factors affecting plant growth. A few things about plant transport, plant cell structure, cellular transport. So if you recall, we had the big 3, and then there were the less important 3, okay, methods by which endocytosis and exocytosis occur. Remember, that's anytime the cell's membrane wraps around something and engulfs it. That's different than obviously diffusion, osmosis, or active transport, okay, because none of those involve a change in the membrane's shape, okay, and there's still the big 3. There's a couple of multiple choice questions about pinocytosis, phagocytosis, and receptor-mediated endocytosis, okay? Those are not part of any written response question, okay? Hello. Hey, no worries. Yes, I got him. You can. Bye. Barrett, Mr. Lytle needs to register you. Do you know who he is? Okay. All right, so yeah, make sure you know those 3. Again, you're not going to have to explain them. They are not part of any written response question. And I made that really, really clear. Okay, that phagocytosis, pinocytosis, and receptor-mediated endocytosis are only in the multiple choice. Okay. All right, there's some stuff about compartmentalization, specialization, cell theory, important people, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, I mentioned that one already. Layers of the leaf. Some plant hormone stuff. Field of view. Yeah. Okay, for the written response, the first question in the written response is about how plants regulate water loss. Okay, just regulate it. Okay, so this is something that was kind of part of the layers of the leaf, two special cells that open and close something. Okay. And it's a 5-mark question. So when you're preparing for this question, you're studying for this question, make sure you look at your notes and come up with 5 points. Okay, 5 marks worth of stuff about how the stomate works. I'm going to just put it right out there. Okay, 5 marks about how the stomates regulate water loss. Question number 2 is a 5-mark question about tropisms. Okay. Today, I went over an example of that type of question, and I gave you what all 5 marks would be. Okay. Similar question. I'm looking for all 5 of those points to be explained by me. Okay, so that's going to include the cause of the tropism, how all tropisms happen, okay? What's gonna occur, okay? That kind of stuff. Question number 3 is a 2-part question. There's a picture of a cell. Part A, tell me what kind of cell it is and why. 3 marks. Okay, so 1 mark for identifying the type of cell correctly, and 2 marks for your explanation. And which could be as simple as these organelles are there, and they're only present in that kind of cell. Okay, maybe even talk about the mode of nutrition or something like that. Okay, and then part B, I have selected 6 parts of that cell for you to identify and give the function. So that's a 15-mark question. Does that make it 1/5 of the test? Should you know the parts of the cell and what they do? 1/5 of the test? I'd say so. And that's just that question. There's like 3 or 4 more marks in the multiple choice about parts of the cell and what they do, so it's big. Question number 4. Multicellularity, layers of the leaf. And you can put a picture of the layers of the leaf. No labels, just the picture. 5 marks. Question number 5, a 6-mark question about plant transport. What does it transport? What transports it? How does it transport it? Okay, question number 6. Remember the example question I gave you about the slug vacation disaster? Question like that, different picture, not a slug vacation disaster. Okay, but it's a cell transport question. There's a picture, and you have to look at it and go, okay, here's how this transport process works and how it applies or doesn't apply, or works or doesn't work in that situation. Like
Will we have like the thing that we had for the chem test where it gave us like a old test with
Yep.
multiple choice and stuff?
This will be the last you need to get one. I'll give you a study package each time, but I only give you a practice test for the first two. I've just never had time to go practice tests. Plus, I feel like by the time you get to unit 3, you should have a pretty good idea of how to prepare. So I kind of wean you off of that. Okay, number 7. Also, like the slug question. Okay, it's another, here's a picture. What cell transport process is going on? Explain how that process works in this situation. Okay. This one here is out of 4. The one that was like the slugs was out of 5. They're 4 or 5, just kind of depends on how much there is to write. Okay, question number 8 is, here's a plant. Here's the conditions the plant's living in. Talk about how it adapts, what hormone might be involved, and how that hormone works. Oh, and I printed the test in color, so the pictures are nice and clear. And there's a description. Obviously, I don't just throw a picture up and go explain. There's a blurb about it. And question number 9 is number 12. Surface area to volume, diffusion, why can't cells get big? Number 9, why can't cells get big? Okay, but there's a situation around basically why can't cells get big? Okay, so that is what is on your test. I will cut this podcast off and post it as well as the review package. And I'll have that ready here soon. Okay, but before I do that, do you guys have any questions I can answer or go through for you right now? Anything you want me to go over in more detail from the unit? Okay, couple of tips. Studying for biology is very, very different than studying for chemistry. Okay? Studying for chemistry, you practiced your skills. You did lots of balancing, or lots of predicting, or lots of naming. Okay? You just practice, practice, practice. Chemistry and physics are practice, practice, practice. Okay? Biology is the 3 R's. Okay? Read, remember, regurgitate. Okay? That's how biology works. Okay? Read, remember, regurgitate. You got to go over your notes. You got to make your own notes. You got to make little flashcards or whatever. Okay? But you've got a lot of material to know. I will ask sometimes just for the regurgitation part. Okay? And other parts are going to be apply what you remember. Okay? That's very much how biology works. Okay? So you're going to have to write a lot more. You're going to have to explain a lot more. You had to explain virtually nothing in chemistry. You just had to demonstrate. Okay? There's almost no demonstration in biology. Okay? It's all application and regurgitation. Okay? It's those 2 things really. Okay? For biology. So studying for bio means reading your notes, making kind of Cole's Notes versions of your notes. Okay? Going over your lab reports, looking at the kind of things I asked on the labs. You can ask the same thing in the exam. Okay, those types of things. Okay, coming and asking for help if you need clarification on something. Okay, I'm here all the time. I have no life. Okay, so you can just come and see me. You're not bothering me or disrupting me. Okay, come in and see me. Okay. For the test, the only thing you need to bring to the test is what you're going to write with. Okay, you don't need your formula sheet. Okay, you don't need your periodic table. Okay, so just that day, bring a couple of writing utensils. Okay, and we'll have the bucket for your phones again, and that's how we'll do it. Okay. So, best way to study. You've got now, what, it's Tuesday, your test is a week from tomorrow. Okay? All night before, Do some the night before. Don't do it all the night before. It's too much. Okay? Pick away at it. Plan little, 20-minute, 30-minute spots where you can do a little bit of studying throughout the next week. Okay? Set aside some minutes here, some minutes there. Okay? Even if you're just taking 5 minutes to read over one part of your notes, that's great. Okay? If all you can spare is 5 minutes at a time here or there, it adds up. Okay? Every little bit helps. Okay? The more often you do it, the better you're going to retain it. If all you do it is the night before, you're going to forget more than half of it. Okay? So space it out. Do your best to do a bit each day. Okay? All right. So no questions from you guys? Okay, I will post the podcast here as well as the review package. So there's 2 posts in Google Classroom from today, the factors affecting plant growth lesson and this review lesson.